Hello dears, today my topic is speaking related questions part 1, part 2 and part 3. Here I explain all these 3 parts as part 1 divided into 2 sections. Here I explain all questions. First question is, tell me something about your secondary school. Well, I studied at Girls Inter College. It had 2-story building. Their staff and teachers were very excellent. I feel proud to become a part of this school. Next, which subject did you find most difficult at school and why? Well, I find difficulty in math because their calculation and their equations are frustrating me, and I stuck between their equation and calculations. That is why I do not like math. Do you ever need that subject now and why or why not? Well, math is a part of day-to-day life. It is really useful in daily routine. I have to calculate different things in my life, and I have to maintain my budget also. That is why it is useful in my current time. Next, what did you enjoy about being a school student? Well, I really feel that school days are golden days of my life. I enjoyed each and every moment of school days in my life. I felt every day was special for me, as their games and friends chit chat, as well as teacher conversation and daily lessons and lectures. I missed all these things. I enjoyed each and every day of school days. Next topic is buildings. Are there any famous buildings in your hometown and what are they? Well, I live in small town. There are many buildings which are popular because of their infrastructure, but there is a one historical church. It is quite popular because of its infrastructure and their architecture design, as well as their theme is also very different, and it is our heritage because it preserved many things from earlier days. That is why it is very popular in my hometown. Next, in what type of building do you most people in your hometown live? Well, the infrastructure of my town is most of buildings are 2 stories, as it is small town. Their buildings are structuring vertical rather than horizontal. Next, should buildings be attractive to look at? Why not? Of course, buildings should be attractive, as buildings are home, and home always should be attractive because it helps to reduce our tension and worries of whole day, and obviously home is always a special part of life. That is why I find buildings should be attractive to maintain the emotion or feeling of person. Next, what is the most unusual buildings you have seen? Why? Well, I I have seen lot of buildings in my life, but I still remember the house. It was my uncle house. It is very different from other house I find, because it's made by wood, and the architecture as well as the furniture all are very expensive and very, we can say, very antique, and it was really unusual because each and everything made by wood, and how it preserved from more than 50 years. It is really amazing. Next is part 2. Here is a question of part 2. Describe an interesting story that you heard or read about in the news. You should say when you heard or read about the story, what the story was about, why the story was in the news, and explain why you thought the story was interesting. Here you explain story heard or read. Okay, it is 2-minute question. We will explain within 2 minutes. Well, here we explain whole points. It divided into 4 points. We try to explain 4 points in our 2-minute conversation. Okay, let's start. Well, I am fond of hearing stories, and I also read number of story. When I was child, I like to hearing stories from my parents as well as from my grandparents as well as from teacher. That is why automatically my interest built in reading story also. I read number of stories in my life. I feel that one of story is very interesting. It was story about a old lady and their granddaughter. It is real story, and it was published on local newspaper. It is real story, that is why it is very popular in my hometown, because it based on their local people's stories, as it all about how grandparents deal with their grandchildren, and grandchildren should be respected them because they need love and care from them. I find it is really interesting stories. In this story, a little girl uh, wants to live with their parents instead of with their grandparents, and that is why their parents decided to send their grandparents to old age home. But because of one of her friend, he know the value of their grandparents, that is why he denied to send them to elder home. It is really inspiring story, because a little girl uh, know the value of their grandparents. It is motivational as well as message based, and I still remember that because of this story, many people like to want to meet her, and they find she is really role model for their children, and as well as their school also is motivated to her on this incidents, and it is really respectful work. I really find this stories interesting because it is a story about current period, as nowadays many new generation many of new generation children do not want to live with their grandparents because of they do not like their restrictions, and they do not like their interference between their life. They fed up with their restriction as well as their work. I find that this story is very interesting and full of inspiration and motivation. Okay, here is part third. First is, when do people like to read the newspaper? Well, it's depend on the individual choice. Some people like to read on morning. Mostly people like to read newspaper in the morning, while some like in their break time or their lunch time. Next, how important is it for people to have a choice of newspaper? Well, newspaper available in different language, and reason wise it's all about person choice. Internet news ever replace newspapers? Why or why not? Well, internet news is very popular, but it cannot be replacing newspapers, as there are many antique area, there is no internet facilities, and some areas have some network problem. That is why I do not feel that newspaper are replaced by internet, and it is still useful to for who are fond of collecting information in their scrapbook or their magazine. That is why it has different feeling to reading in a paper based or internet, as most of people like to read newspaper in the evening or in the morning, but sometime internet or network does not work. That is why newspaper always best for these people, and some people like to collect information by cutting news and their favorite celebrities pictures. That is why I find that newspaper have different attachment or satisfaction for their reader. Okay, thank you.